Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. You may remember a few videos I did calling out figures like John Delarose as not being journalists due to lacking journalistic integrity. Well, recently, on X, formerly known as Twitter, I got into a bit of a debate with the founder of the comics blog Bleeding Cool. I call it a blog and not a journalistic outlet. As per the founder, Rich Johnston's own words, he was not a journalist and his website is not a news site but a blog. Confused. Wikipedia seems to list it as a news site. Weird. The topic in question was whether or not Rich was a reporter, not a journalist as he refused that label in a prior debate with Eric July, or an op-ed writer. Rich had been insistent on the fact that even if he gave his opinion, he was still a reporter because he broke news. But the thing is, that doesn't matter. In one of the later replies I said this: you can give your opinion on first-hand events, or you can report on it by giving the facts at hand. Once you do the former, you're no longer doing the latter. It's that simple. Seriously, how do you not know this? Aren't you a professional? What Rich Johnston and others in his trade, as per his own words, don't understand is what they do isn't reporting, and it certainly isn't journalism either. While Rich may not take the label, many who share his attitudes do. What they do is known as editorializing, or giving opinions on a matter, and there is a very strong difference between reporting and journalism and editorializing. As Voltaire has said, if you wish to speak to me, define your terms. I've stated before that journalists must follow a code of ethics. They must report on the facts neutrally and without a bias to give their readers information, without deciding the opinions on said information for them. When they do give their opinions, however, this is what's known as an editorial, and the major difference between a report and an editorial is that an editorial is non-neutral and opinionated. Once the writer's opinions are inserted, it becomes an editorial, as it's no longer just the facts at hand, but the author's opinions and interpretation inserted. This distinction has been concrete since the difference has been defined. In Rich's own words, as you can see on screen, he finds being neutral to be, quote, boring as hell. Thus he relinquishes any claim he has to be a reporter or a journalist, as he has no interest in journalistic neutrality and integrity. Though to be fair, if he were to own the title of columnist or blogger, rather than continuing to fight for the title of reporter, there wouldn't be a problem. Being an editorialist isn't a problem in and of itself. Heck, I'm an op-ed blogger. Blogger, technically. Even in my videos about certain media tropes and the like, I give what is ultimately my opinion, and at no point did I claim to be a reporter or a journalist. Rich does, however, claim the reporter title, but he refuses to take the responsibility involved to earn said title. It's almost like stolen valor in a sense, taking credit for something you never did, and that's not cool. The problem with today's so-called journalism, be it in political news, current events, and even in media reporting like comic book blogs and video game news sites, is that people don't want to be true reporters or journalists. They want to be opinion writers, but they still want to be treated like neutral reporters and journalists. This is what led to things like Gamergate, Metalgate, and to a smaller extent, Comicsgate, though the latter is more regarding the quality of comic book stories. There is a demand for neutral reporting that's not being fulfilled, as the current cast of so-called reporters refuse to be neutral. And it can't really be considered entirely their fault, though they do know better, most of them anyway. I would hope Rich Johnston understands the difference between opinion and news, despite his refusal to admit as such.
Oh, what a day! Maybe the headlines will cheer me up. It's opinion, not news!
This is largely a problem both with the education of such so-called reporters and journalists and the culture they have fostered. In the issue of education, no teacher or professor in this day and age has any interest in teaching their students how to think, as they're too busy teaching them what to think. This too applies to many journalism professors who neglect teaching the stated ethics of journalism as encoded by the Society of Professional Journalists, rather instead teaching their students how to enshroud their own opinions as fact using journalist as the title. And because of this, we now have a privileged class of, at the end of the day, bloggers pretending to be journalists who find themselves better than others when in all honesty, all they're doing is stating their own opinions or the opinions given to them by their professors. That's something, honestly, anyone can do. In fact, I'm doing it right now. See? It's not that hard. It was later in the day when I saw his tweet from an earlier conversation that showed his worldview. Allow me to read it out verbatim. Writing things neutrally would show a lack of integrity. Don't you want me to believe in what I write? And that just goes to show that his worldview is the result of bad education and being in a culture that enforces it. Because anyone who knows anything about having integrity as a reporter knows what he said is the exact opposite of truth. People don't go to reporters because they, quote, believe in what they're saying. People go to reporters to get information. A reporter covering a blimp crash is going to react in the moment, yes, but will try to keep it to what he's witnessing. A reporter's job is to report the facts as they're happening. It is not to insert themselves into a story. That is not only not having any integrity as a reporter, but having the exact opposite of it, making it all about how you feel about the news and events you're reporting on.
One guy talking plenty for everybody, and then me, myself, right, and then I, and then myself, and me. I couldn't tell this one about I because I was talking about myself, and then me.
It's taking the news and making it about yourself. If you're watching this, Rich, this is why you're not a reporter. You're a columnist, a blogger, an op-ed writer. You give your opinion, even if it's on breaking news, rather than just reporting on the breaking news. Therefore, to call yourself a journalist, which you don't, or a reporter, which you do, is a disservice to journalists and reporters who keep themselves out of the news they report on. There is no shame in being an opinion writer. Take it from one opinionated person to another. If you want to share your opinion, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I encourage you. Go with God, my brother in Christ. But when you call what you do anything but giving your opinion is where I have the issue. And it's where a number of others have an issue with you as well, judging by how this debate played out between you and members of Young Ripa's audience. If you were ever to take my advice, it'd have to be this. Have a sense of humility, dude. It'll save your life someday. In fact, if you came out and said, I don't agree with Eric July's politics, therefore I won't cover his comics on my editorial blog, I'd personally have far more respect for you because at least then you're being honest. But because Bleeding Cool is positioned as a place to get comic book news, the fact that you don't cover him for that reason stands out. You can't have it both ways. And you can spare me that, but Eric July said this about me nonsense. That's just whataboutism, and you know it. A reporter for a comic book website has a duty to their viewers not only to give them the news of what's going on in the industry, be it news about comic book events, conventions, new up-and-coming creators and publications, the goings-on within the industry and what have you, but to also not insert themselves into said news unless it's specifically stated to be an opinion editorial. If it makes you feel better, call yourself a comic book critic, though that would be putting you in the same league as Linkara, but it'd at least be more honest.
Gay, dead, Muppet gangbang. What the fuck?
Journalistic and reporter integrity standards used to be commonplace. Sadly, they no longer are, and the culture of elitists enforcing their opinions on others that has replaced it is no substitute. James Madison once said, knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. To deprive people of the necessary knowledge to arm themselves by providing them instead knowledge through a filtered lens, deprives them with the means to fight against ignorance, and thus spreads ignorance even further. After all, John Adams as well has said, liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people, and that knowledge cannot be diluted or filtered in any way. People must be allowed to make up their minds for themselves. Yes, that means sometimes people will disagree with you, and I know this is hard to hear, but that's okay. People are allowed to have differing opinions. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It certainly doesn't mean that they're going to erect death camps. All it means is different people come from all different walks of life, and as such, have different mindsets. That's why reporting the facts without opinions inserted is integral. It allows different people to make up their own minds. To make up their minds for them is like taking away their choices and making them a slave, and that's not cool at all. If you're a journalist, have a sense of integrity and keep yourself loyal to the code for the good of your readers. If you're a reporter, don't make it about yourself. Just state the facts as they are, and if you're like me, and you're an opinionated asshole, just say so, as there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. The issue is in being the latter, but then saying you're one of the two former. But that's my take. Hopefully this helps clarify some things, but somehow I doubt Mr. Johnston will change his mind on this matter, as some opinionated assholes are also stubborn jackasses, but one could hope. But until that day comes, this has been the Koopa Man. If you like this video, leave a like and subscribe as it helps my channel grow. If you have any comments you can add to this conversation, feel free to discuss in the comments as I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. And until next time, game on.